He mopped those marble floors every night, silent, invisible, forgotten. No one knew his name, but everyone walked over his work. Then, one morning, something happened in that glass tower, a billion-dollar problem that 500 of the smartest minds couldn't solve. Security cameras caught what no one expected. The janitor, alone, in front of that whiteboard, writing the answer. What followed wasn't just shocking. It showed how deeply prejudice can bury brilliance. For sometimes, the people we ignore are the ones who could change everything. For years, Malcolm Carter was just the janitor. He moved quietly through the halls of a billion-dollar tech company, polishing glass walls that reflected faces that never looked back. Each night, while others celebrated breakthroughs and bonuses, he swept their footprints away, his reflection the only one left in the empty boardroom. But behind those tired eyes lay a man who dreamed once of being an engineer, a dream buried under bills, rejection letters, and a system that never gave him a chance. He never complained, never asked for more, until the night he overheard something that stopped his broom mid-swing. A crisis, a problem no one could solve. And that was the moment the world's blind spot met its biggest test. The whole company was in an uproar the next morning. Screens flashing their red warnings, executives whispering in a panic, deadlines bleeding into despair. The billion-dollar contract driving system had crashed, and every failed attempt to fix it cost millions. Consultants flew in, experts argued, but nothing worked. Malcolm kept his distance, feigning not to listen as he emptied bins spilling over with crumpled notes and cold coffee cups. Yet he saw it, patterns encode up on screens, formulae that didn't add up. It was like watching someone try to force the wrong key into a lock he already knew how to open. His heart pounded with a mixture of fear and something he hadn't felt in years' certainty. He knew the answer, but he also knew what he looked like to them. A janitor in faded overalls, invisible until he made a mistake. That night, long after everyone was gone, he remained. Above him, the boardroom lights hummed as he approached the whiteboard full of half-erased chaos. Slowly, cautiously, he began to write. Equations, connections, fixes. His hands shook, not from doubt, but from the weight of what could happen if someone saw him. The chief executive got there at dawn, hoping for a miracle. What he found stopped him cold rows of perfect calculations written in neat, confident strokes. And there, standing quietly beside his mop, was Malcolm. For a long moment, no one said anything. The silence was heavier than the failure that had filled the room the night before. When the truth came out, that the janitor solved what 500 experts couldn't, the reaction wasn't applause. It was suspicion. He must have seen it online, someone whispered. He probably messed with the system. The same people who ignored him now looked at him like a threat. Security was called. The questions turned into accusations. Malcolm tried to explain, but every word was drowned out by disbelief. The CEO's face was inscrutable. Cameras clicked. Reporters started calling it a fluke, a lucky guess. No one wanted to believe a black janitor could outsmart their brightest minds. Still, the system worked, the company was saved. But Malcolm's world was falling apart. His locker was searched, his hours were cut, and whispers followed him down every hallway he once cleaned in peace. But there was one thing they didn't know. Malcolm had proof. A trail of notes, timestamp files, and camera shots showing exactly when and how he found the solution. He hadn't said a word about it yet. He was waiting, watching, because sometimes the only way to expose a system built on prejudice is to let it destroy itself first. And when the next board meeting approached, Malcolm decided that this time he wouldn't stay silent. The boardroom was packed that morning. Executives, investors, and the same experts who once dismissed him. Malcolm stood at the edge of the room, clutching a small folder, the faint smell of bleach still clinging to his hands. He hadn't been invited, but when the CEO announced a presentation on the miracle fix, he walked in anyway. Every eye turned toward him, some surprised, most irritated. Behind the CEO, on the screen, flashed equations and results. Applause erupted. But when the CEO said, "Our research team solved the crisis," something in Malcolm broke. His hand shook, but he stepped forward. No, he said softly. The room fell silent. That's not true. Laughter rippled, then died when he laid the folder on the table proof. Timestamps, logs, footage of him working through the night. For a moment, no one moved. Then came the words that burned into him forever. You expect us to believe you did this? The tone wasn't disbelief, it was insult. Security moved closer. A voice muttered, "Stay in your place." Cameras recorded, yet nobody intervened. The CEO's eyes flickered guilt, then anger. "Take him out," he ordered. As the guards grabbed his arms, papers flew like snow, his handwritten equations fluttering across the polished floor. But before they dragged him out, Malcolm looked up, his voice steady, his eyes fierce. "You can erase my name," he said, "but not the truth." The room froze. The CEO's speech faltered. The cameras kept rolling. And for the first time, every person in that room saw what they had refused to see, the brilliance they had buried under uniform. Outside, the building was swarmed with reporters. Inside, silence. The truth was out now, and it couldn't be swept away like dust on the floor. Because sometimes the loudest statement a man can make is just refusing to stay invisible. In the following days, the footage went viral. Clips of Malcolm being dragged from the boardroom flooded social media. His equations, his cool defiance, his final words. First, the company tried to keep that story silent. But the truth doesn't stay quiet when it hits a nerve. Journalists dug deeper into how Malcolm's ideas had been erased, how his reports were ignored long before the crisis ever began. In a matter of weeks, the public's outrage grew. The CEO resigned under pressure. The experts who had mocked him disappeared, and Malcolm, once an invisible janitor, was invited to speak about his story at universities. But he didn't do it for revenge. He did it for every voice that had ever been dismissed because of the color of its skin. Still, fame didn't erase the scars. The years of being overlooked couldn't be rewritten with headlines or applause. Yet something powerful had changed. People began to see what they'd been trained to overlook. Companies launched diversity initiatives. Students wrote essays about him. Somewhere in a quiet city street, a young man was pushing a broom and looked up at a news screen to find Malcolm's smiling face looking back at him. That was the real victory. Not the money, not the recognition, but realizing that dignity doesn't need permission and brilliance has no uniform. Because racism doesn't always shout. It often whispers, hides behind policies, and smiles in hallways. And unless we call it out, it keeps sweeping lives aside, just like dust. So ask yourself, how many more Malcolms are still unseen today? And what would the world look like if we finally chose to see them?